Did you know that independent financial advice might not be as independent as you think? Have you ever stopped to think about what it means when someone says they are independent? It's a word that's used a lot in personal finance, but often in a way that you might not expect. I'm John DeGuy, a portfolio manager at Stand-Up Advisors at Design Securities. I've spent my entire career championing truly independent financial advice, and I remain dismayed at how so many people in the industry misuse the term independent. Let's start at the beginning. How would you define the word independent? Obviously, different people have different interpretations of what the word means, but if you consult a dictionary, it's likely to say something like free of any external influence. And if you're truly independent, you'll be allowed to make your own decisions for your own reasons, free of any biases or pressures that might be brought to bear. I recently had a conversation with a senior executive from CIRO, which is the Canadian Investment Regulatory Organization, and CIRO is the self-regulatory organization, or SRO, for Canadian Securities and Mutual Fund registrants. According to this person, the industry generally defines independent as not owned by a bank. That's preposterous. There's not a single dictionary on the planet that would accept that definition. The problem with SROs is that they mark their own papers. They regulate their own industry in its own interests in a way that is supposed to protect the wider population, but often falls short. It serves no one to have such a ridiculous definition of independent. According to this person, any firm that is not owned by a bank can call itself independent without any negative repercussions. Now think about that. It is very well known that the Canadian finance industry makes outsized profits by distributing proprietary products. There are dozens of firms in Canada that are not banks that have proprietary products, and yet these firms will hold out to the public as being independent, and the industry regulator will say nothing to call them out on it. There's a clear incentive for these firms to recommend their own in-house products because those products are more profitable for the firm's shareholders, often at the expense of the unit holders who own the products. Here's a second example. More than half of all mutual fund registrants in Canada are paid through trailing commissions. These are legitimate forms of compensation associated with the sale of investment products, usually mutual funds. The problem is that most of the expensive actively managed products pay trailing commissions, while most of the cheaper passively managed products do not. You see the problem? If an advisor has a business model where he or she is paid exclusively through commissions, and one type of product pays commissions while the other does not, it should be obvious that the advisor will recommend the type that pays. Product suitability and merit should never take a backseat to an advisor's preferred method of compensation. There's nothing wrong with earning trailing commissions, but there's a lot wrong with earning trailing commissions while holding out as being independent. Think of it this way. If actively managed products paid no trailing commissions, but passively managed products did pay trailing commissions, we'd likely see advisors change their product recommendations across the board so that 100% of the products they're currently recommending would be replaced with other products that are currently not recommended at all. How is that independent? These two examples have been around for decades. I'm not saying anything that hasn't been said before about the concerns that investor advocates have regarding the industry. The problem, as I see it, is that the industry knowingly and deliberately misrepresents what it means to be independent in a way that will reassure and mollify investors, often to their own detriment, so that registrants and the firms they work for can make more money than would otherwise be the case. I've been talking about this problem for over 20 years, and the financial services industry has done very little to disabuse investors of this false perception that they have not only allowed to persist, but have actively condoned. It's been going on for an entire generation. As an investor, you should be prepared to have a full and frank discussion with the person giving you financial advice. Ask them open-endedly if they're independent. If they're at a bank-owned firm, they might acknowledge that they're not, although I've heard many stories of registrants at bank-owned firms who sanctimoniously insist that they are independent anyway. Follow that first question up by probing a bit further. Does the firm they work for offer any proprietary products? If yes, how does that advisor justify holding out as being independent? Let's say the advisor's firm doesn't have any proprietary products. The obvious next question is, will you charge me a fee either based on assets under management or services provided, or will you be paid a trailing commission from the products we use? Once again, I ask that you listen for the answer while employing a bit of common sense and critical thinking to what you hear. There are hundreds of thousands of Canadians who are getting advice that they believe is independent that would never ever be characterized as such in a court of law or by any reasonable person. The people at Xero should be ashamed of themselves, but they're too busy protecting corporate interests that use self-serving definitions to really care about the investors they're supposed to be protecting.